The 5th day. The 2nd decapitation. Death to wolves, and death to pigs too. I woke to a loud knocking, my head still swirling with sleep. I got up and opened the door, only to have Hikari-san charge into the room and grab me by the collar. "You bastard!" she suddenly screamed. No, this wasn't Hikari-san, I realised. The day Hikari-san says something like "you bastard" is the day I changed my name to Samantha. To say something like that and grab me by the collar was, for Hikari-san, literally impossible. She lacked the ability. This was most likely not Teruko-san either, so it must be Hikari-san. "Because of you, this... God damn it, you shithead!" Even for Hikari-san, this was pretty uncharacteristic behaviour. In a complete frenzy, she looked as if she was going to start pummeling me any second. Or, actually, she had already beaten on my chest several times at this point. I was just too surprised by her behaviour to notice the pain. "I'm tired of this happening," she panted and trembled. "No more of this, it's just too awful. It's too awful. Why? Why?" "Take it easy, Hikari-san." I grabbed her shoulders and gave her a firm shaking. "Did something happen?" She shot me a glare. It was the look of true resentment, vengeful indignation from the core of her being. She glared with all her might. Hadn't Hikari-san said something yesterday along the lines of, "We've been trained to maintain our composure"? It wasn't likely that Hikari-san had undergone training that Hikari-san hadn't. Yet, here she was, out of her mind. What the hell had happened? At last, she shook her head gently. I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. My behaviour was very inappropriate." She hung her head in shame. "It's not even your fault. This terrible thing isn't your fault. Hey, don't worry about it. But what exactly happened?" I repeated my question. "Whatever it is, please tell me." Instead of answering directly, she spun around with her back to me. "Please come to meet with me to the 1st floor storage room," she said, and began walking. I stood frozen. "What? But that..." Hikari-san and Teruko-san had supposedly spent the night in the mainland. When they had gotten back, according to the watch Kunigisa fixed for me, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning, although it was hard to read since the numbers were backward. It was unlike me to have overslept. How embarrassing. But now was no time for such thoughts. When Hikari-san had returned and how long I overslept were far too trivial matters at this point. More important. "Hikari-san, what did you just say?" The 1st floor storage room. I had a bad feeling about this. Who was down there? I had a real bad feeling. What was happening on this island? A really bad feeling. And the feeling was probably right. There was a pattern developing here. "Hey, wake up, Tomo." Good morning." "Put my hair up." Kunigisa sleepily raised her head. She wore a strange, content expression, like she had been having a nice dream. "It seems like now's not the time for that." She rubbed her eyes. "That means I don't have to wash my face either." An inward opening door. On the other side, Akane-san laid face down, her body pointing towards us. As a result, the cross-section of the cut, as well as all the flesh and bone and veins it revealed, was in plain sight. It was a grotesque reminder that in the end, human beings are nothing more than giant wads of organic matter. Yes, it was yet another decapitated body. Just like Kanami-san's body, the head had been completely severed from the very base of the neck. It was dressed in a suit, an expensive-looking grey one, ruined by bloodstains, but even supposing it hadn't been, just was the case with Kanami-san's dress the day before, there was no one left to wear it. The room was stark and barren. I had spent 3 days here. Akane-san hadn't lasted 1 night. It was an empty room. The only things inside it were a wooden chair by the wall and a house telephone hanging on the wall, a futon, a few books Akane-san had presumably brought with her, and a lampstand. "The door was locked, right?" Iria-san asked. "Right, Hikari?" "Yes." Hikari-san's voice trembled. I looked over to see that her body was also trembling. It was definitely locked. No mistake. "Well, what about the window then?" I looked up at the sound of Iria's voice. At the very top of the wall, opposite the door, where we all stood, there was a rectangular window. It was strictly for letting sunlight and ventilation. As far as allowing someone to sneak in or out, it was open. It had an open-closed lever that could operate within the room. If you thought about it, it was just big enough to let a single person pass through, if the person put a little effort. But still, it's too high, I said to no one particular. Breaking in through the window would be like taking a 2-story dive, and breaking out would have been even worse. The impossibility of getting in or out through the window was the reason we chose this room as Akane-san's cell in the first place. In other words, the window was impenetrable. However, the only other port of entry or exit had been locked. This was a dead end. Another sealed room. A second decapitation. 2 decapitations. 2 sealed rooms. Kunigisa, who was standing next to me, let out a whine. I tried to say something, but ultimately stayed silent. Lying on the floor before us was the headless body of the woman we had all suspected was the killer. In a situation like this, what words were suitable? The head was nowhere to be found. This meant that, just like Kanami-san, accidental death and suicide were out of the question. Anyway, it looks like we've got some things to reconsider, Iria-san finally said. Can we all gather in the dining room? Hikari, lock this room. Once again, Iria-san was the first to leave. Rei-san silently followed close behind. Some things to reconsider, I repeated painfully. Indeed, that was right. All of our thinking and every speculation we had made up to this point would have been wiped clean. It also seemed as if we had a lot of new details to consider. I guess this makes it a serial killing, huh? It was really painful to say that. A serial killing. I had locked Akane-sen to prevent the very thing, and she had become a second victim as a result. Yeah, a real safe situation we created. What the hell did I think would happen? What did I expect from a person who kills others and cuts their head off? Probably good sense and strategic thinking of, a human being. I had felt so relaxed, totally at ease, completely proud of myself. I'd stopped the killer from moving around. I was so confident, carried away, big-headed. Akane-san's words from the previous night all came rushing back. The words she had left me with. Could this be forgiven? It's all nonsense, really. I turned on my heels and left the crime scene. At that moment, I spotted Nisioisin out of the corner of my eye. She looked terribly pale, even more so than yesterday. I guess you would expect as much from anyone who'd seen 2 headless corpses in 2 days. It wasn't like looking at pork or chicken. Still, there was something. Just then, Nisioisin seemed to notice my gaze and sped off to the dining room, as if to get away from me. I wondered what that was about, while Kunigisa tugged at my arm. Ichan, let's go already. Iria-chan will get tired of waiting around. Everyone's already gone. There's no point in sticking around. I nodded. Things to rethink, and new things to think about. As such, the morning of the 5th day was total crap. It was around 2 in the morning, Hikari-san said. Dining room, round table. But we were 2 fewer people than just 2 days ago. The artist extraordinaire, Ibuki Kanami, and member of the 7 Fools, Soniyama Akane, the bickering duo was no more. They were no longer alive. I received a phone call from my room, from Soniyama-san. She said that she had forgotten a book in her room and she wanted me to bring it to her. And then, Iria-san said, I presume you did what you were told. Yes, Hikari-san nodded. It was kind of an old-looking paperback, of Bakaichi, by Mushano Koji. That's not really important. So at the time, Akane-san was still alive, yes? And she had a head. Yes, at that time she was alive, Hikari-san said, distinctly. This meant that Akane-san had been killed after 2 a.m. I had presumed I was the last person to see Akane-san alive, so I was a little surprised. But really, I don't suppose I'd seen her per se, since we had only spoken through the door. Her body had apparently been discovered around 9 o'clock that morning. She usually woke up and went to breakfast at a set time every day, so Hikari-san was concerned when no call came from Akane-san's room, and thus became the one to discover the body. At first, she had suspected that Akane-san merely overslept on account of being in a new environment, but reality had something else in store. At any rate, assuming Hikari-san's testimony was true, the time of the murder was limited to a 7.5-hour window. The body didn't appear freshly killed at the time it was discovered, so it seemed the murder probably occurred in the middle of the night. Well then, Irie-san said, looking over the people at the table. Let's start by looking into alibis like we did yesterday. She sounded like she was planning some kind of game. I won't claim to be able to judge what's inside Irie-san's heart, but at the very least, she seemed to have no sense of sadness or grief. No matter who it had all happened to, or what happened, it didn't happen to her. That's all there was to it. This time, I don't have an alibi. I decided to get the ball rolling since nobody else was talking. Hikari-san came to visit our room around 10-11 last night, I think. But then Kunigisa and I went to bed and fell asleep. You went to bed together? Irie-san teased. Yeah, right. Went to bed was just a figure of speech. I slept on the sofa. But if you both went to sleep, there's no way of confirming that one of you didn't slip out in the middle of the night. Oh, but you can rule me out. Kunigisa slid her hand horizontally across her neck. The storage room is on the first floor, right? And I can't go downstairs alone. Huh? Not only Irie-san, but everyone gawked at Kunigisa in surprise. Well, everyone except Maki-san, who wore an utterly indifferent expression, as if to say, I already knew that, but you can always count on her to be the exception. That's why I always make Ii-chan come with me. Yep, I hadn't come to this island just because I was bored or interested. I had a bona fide reason for being here, and Kunigisa needed me. Kunigisa had a wide array of unique quirks and characteristics that made everyday life a serious health risk, but among those were 3 major ones, and within those 3 was one of special note. She couldn't handle extreme vertical locomotion on her own. That was a rule. I suppose it was more fitting to call it rigid, compulsive, subconscious rule that lay somewhere in her mind than a quirk. If poorly enforced, it would be revealed and she would scream and shout and you wouldn't be able to lay a finger on her. It was the same way years ago. I wondered if she might be cured, but it seemed that it wasn't such a simple condition. Is that right? A look of surprise remained on Irie-san's face. But this is the first time I've heard about this. Well, it's not really something you bring up all the time, but if you've been observing me, you'll note that I've never gone up or downstairs alone the whole time I've been on this island. I was always with her during meals, or else she was locked up in a room. Kunigisa Tomo. Now that you mention it, you do always get that guy to come to your room and get you, but we don't have any way to prove this. We do have a medical certificate, I said. It's a mental disorder, so to speak, so I think we can confirm Kunigisa's alibi for now. Not mine, though. Irie-san seemed to be pondering this for a moment, but then switched her train of thought. Well, what about Himine-san? I was in my room drinking all night. She looked over to Shinya-san, together with that wonderful gentleman over there. Is that right, Sakaki-san? Well, I don't know about the gentleman part, but otherwise, yes. He gave Maki-san a little wink. I only meant to go bother her for a little bit, but I ended up staying the whole night drinking. That makes 2 nights in a row that they were up drinking. They must have had incredible endurance. Or maybe that wasn't the case for Shinya-san. Maybe he just couldn't bear being sober at the loss of Kanami-san. I could imagine how important she was to him. He had taught her painting, and even raised her to surpass him. She was special. Her existence had been important to him. Neither of us were particularly intoxicated, so I think we can vouch for each other, Shinya-san said. Yeah, it was around 1 a.m. I couldn't get to sleep, because of what happened. So I went to the living room and there she was. Then she invited me to her room and we ended up staying there until morning. Yep, that's what he meant. But either way, he was in her room for a fact. So the 2 of them had solid alibis. I was sleeping the whole time, Nisioisin said before being asked, as if we were going in some sort of order. I've got no alibi at all, but I think Hikari-san can at least vouch that I got up at 6 a.m. and then she helped me prepare for breakfast. For some reason, she sort of mumbled her words. She looked to see Irie-san's reaction. There was something off about her. Something about her bizarre disposition that bothered me. It's hard to explain, but something caught my attention. I just didn't know what it was. Irie-san said. How about you, Hikari? Well, I delivered the book to Soniyama-san at 2 a.m. Then I went to bed, so I don't have an alibi until the time I woke up this morning. I see. Oh, I suppose I have to give my story as well. I was in my room talking with Rei all night. We were discussing what to do from here on and what to tell Aikawa-san. Isn't that right, Rei? Rei silently nodded. I had already slept that afternoon, so I couldn't get to sleep at night. But by the time we finished talking, it was already morning, so I figured it was too late to try and sleep. And then, the usual things. and then finally breakfast. I think that's a solid alibi, isn't it? For some reason, Irie-san looked at me when she said it. It was a challenging gaze. I shrugged. Yep, sure is. So when did Teriko-san and Akari-san get back? At about 9 o'clock. It was Akari-san who was only a short while ago jumped on me in Kunagisa's room. She had completely returned to normal by this point, but she didn't try to make eye contact with me. 9 o'clock. Speaking of which, she had said something strange earlier. I'm so tired of this happening, or something to that effect. But what was she so tired of? No matter how you look at it, there was something strange about her whole manner at the time. Something told me she wasn't just referring to Kanami-san's death. Well, I guess that means Akari and Teriko have alibis, yes? Which means, Irie-san said, the people with alibis are Sakaki-san, Himane-san, followed by me and Rei, and Teriko and Hikari. And most likely Kunagisa as well. That's 7. On the other side, we have myself, Sashirona Yayoi, and Shiga Hikari, and the 3 of us had no alibis, but while the question of who had an alibi was an important one, there was one thing more important in this case. Hikari-san? Yes, she looked in my direction. Maybe I'm being too trivial here, but could you tell me whether or not the window was open when you delivered the book in the storage room at 2 o'clock? She looked off into space as she thought about it for a moment. I believe it was closed, she answered. I see. Is it something a person could easily open? Yes, it's supposed to be for ventilation, so if you just use the lever, you have to crank it a little like this. It opens and closes normally, but that's only from the inside. It's completely sealed from the outside. I see. This was a troublesome development. A very troublesome development. A window more than 10 feet high, without a ladder, it's virtually impossible for someone to climb out. Even more implausible that someone had climbed in. In other words, we had another locked room mystery. Well, tell me then, how about handling the key? Are there copies of anything? I have the only key, and there are no copies or master keys. She seemed pretty worried, which was only natural. The implications of this conversation were that she was the only one who could have possibly committed the murder. Just looking at it objectively, that was the most likely case. But I wasn't about to point that out. I didn't want to cause another Akane-san style mishap. What type of lock is it? Just a normal one. You twist the key like this, and the bolt latches. I don't know the official name. And you definitely locked the door at 2 a.m. Yes, I locked it, for sure. I checked several times. She answered with a somewhat pained expression. For sure. I see. She was an honest girl, to the point they must have made life difficult for her. Seeing her like this, it seemed clear to me that she wasn't the killer. If she were the killer, she wouldn't have gone to all the trouble to report that she'd been called to Akane-san's room in the middle of the night. Anyone could have deduced that much. Of course, you couldn't throw out the possibility that she strategized all this to fool everyone. That kind of argument could go on forever. I continued my questioning. And nobody else was in her room when you went there? What about the possibility that someone was hiding in the dark, or something like that? Well, I didn't sense anybody else in the room, but she tilted her head, as if she didn't quite get the point of the question. I can't be certain. I didn't actually go into the room. I gave her the book at the door. Weren't you scared? Yayoi-san suddenly asked, her voice faint. She wore an upset expression, and continued. I mean, didn't we all think that Soniyama-san might be the killer? And you met with her alone, in the middle of the night? Weren't you scared? No, not at all, Hikari-san answered after a moment's hesitation. I didn't think Soniyama-san was the killer. Why not? For some reason, Yayoi-san was being strangely pushy with Hikari-san. What makes you sure? Well, Hikari-san looked over me with a worried expression. It was because of her conversation with Kunagisa yesterday. Indeed, after hearing that conversation, there was no reason to suspect Akane-san in particular. I thought about things as I watched the conversation unfold between the two ladies, but I couldn't pin anything down. It seemed to me that if something had happened, it probably happened around 2 a.m, when Hikari-san delivered the book, but then, after listening to her testimony, that didn't seem to be the case. So what to do now? How to continue? I don't suppose the room was completely sealed. The window was open after all, Irie-san said to me. In that sense, it's not exactly what you would define as sealed. But it's impossible to get in or out through the window. There's a chair in the room, right? Couldn't you reach the window if you stood on the chair? I don't think so. Even if you stretched and jumped at the same time, I don't think you could reach it. Shinya-san is the tallest person here, and I don't even think that he could reach it. Is that so? So Ibuki-san's room was sealed off by a river of paint, and this time, it's a room sealed off by a height problem. Irie-san stretched out her arms with an irritated sigh. And both women were decapitated. Yeah, there was that issue as well. The killer had cut Kanami-san and Akane-san's heads. That was still a mystery. There was no reason to suspect switched bodies, but what other reason was there to cut off the heads? Could we just write it off as a bizarre fluke? What's more, the fact that the killer took the severed head didn't make much sense. Of course, there was also the possibility that the killer severed the head specifically for the sake of taking it somewhere. But what in the world do you do with a severed human head? And that question just led to other questions. Why were these women killed in the first place? I had no idea. This case was full of things I didn't understand. It was all hopeless and meaningless. Damn it. Since when had I become so dumb? Looking at things objectively, Hikari is the most suspicious one here, Irie-san said suddenly. Hikari-san flinched for a moment. Hikari was the one with the key, and one of the three people with no alibi. If the window isn't open at the entrance or the exit, the door is the only possibility, right? There are three people without alibis, but only one of those three has the key. Please, hold on a second. I barged into Irie-san's monologue. That's no good. That's not a fair assumption. Assumption? I believe the correct term is reasoning. Hikari-san watched our interaction with a worried expression. She didn't know what to say. It's like Akane-san said yesterday. It's foolish to reach a conclusion based on the process of elimination and selective thinking. I won't go as far to call it foolish, but I do think we're leaving things out. I wonder, is that right? I don't think so personally. It was that thinking that caused me to have Akane-san locked up as the prime suspect. And this is the result. This is the result of that, Irie-san. There's nothing I can say about what's already over and done, but I refuse to make the same mistake again. You understand, right? It's too dangerous for anyone to be left alone anymore. Now you tell me, she said with a smile. Under different circumstances, it might have been even pretty. Wasn't it your idea to have Akane-san locked up? Sorry, secluded, in the first place. That's correct. I'm not here to debate that fact. It was I who suggested we lock her up. It was I who suggested we lock her up in there, and so it's my duty to counter that suggestion. If I have to take responsibility for what happened, making sure it doesn't happen again is how I'll take that responsibility. At this point, it's still too early to determine who the killer is. We're still not even thinking about things we need to be thinking about. Maki-san let out a big yawn, possibly because she hadn't slept in 2 days, or possibly because she was bored by the conversation. Most likely, it was both of those things. She was just a bystander. Well, I still think Hikari's the most suspicious, and there was absolutely no sense of comparison in a word. There was absolutely no sense of compassion. There was absolutely no sense of compassion for her words for this maid. There was absolutely no sense of compassion in her words for this maid, with whom she coexisted under the same roof for all these years. She was completely devoid of sentimentality. She spoke with an icy cold tone of someone who simply reported facts as facts, with no emotion inserted whatsoever. I thought I knew. The answer to Kunigisa's question from yesterday. The reason this woman had been exiled from the Akagami family. Akagami area. This world was all the same to her. By and large, it had all been the same lack of value. And so, she was searching for something of value. Unable to find it, she was able to rid her life of anything without a shred of hesitation. I've been wondering what she had done. I had almost assumed that she had done something, but in reality, maybe that was the wrong assumption. Maybe it wasn't that she had done anything wrong, but that she couldn't exist as part of the Akagami family. Furthermore, maybe it wasn't the family that had shunned her, but in fact, the other way round. It wasn't out of the question. And here I thought it was supposed to be her job to stick up for Hikari-san. Well, let's do this then, I suggested, without looking up at Irie-san. We can say for a fact that it's no longer safe for anyone to be alone. So, let's divide into teams. No complaints about that, right, Irie-san? I don't think we need to bother explaining the purpose of making teams, right? It's just safer than moving around alone. And that way, we can all watch each other's backs. Now, since I've been sticking up for Hikari-san, I'll be on her team. Her, Kunigisa, and I will be on Team A. How does that sound? Interesting. Irie-san seemed genuinely impressed. You're smarter than you look, huh? Teams, huh? Well, naturally, I'll be teamed up with Rei, Ikari, Teriko. Then let's have Maki-san, Shinya-san, and Yayoi-san on Team C. Shinya-san and Maki-san have been confirmed innocent twice in a row now, so Yayoi-san can put herself at ease. And even if Yayoi-san is the killer, it would be 2 against 1. Does that sound okay? What if we just have everyone stay in the dining room together until Aikawa-san gets here? Hikari-san said, looking over with some worried expression. That way, nobody has to be alone, and the killer can't take any actions either. We can't do that. You mean just stay put here? Don't be ridiculous. I spoke not only to Hikari-san, but the entire group. Kunigisa and I have some moving around to do. For the time being, we decided to bury Akane-san's body. As was the case with Kanami-san's body the day before, simply leaving it there on the floor was out of the question. Irie-san didn't seem to have any plans to call the police anyway, so we went ahead and did as we felt. We decided it was best to use the digital camera to first take pictures of the scene of the crime, as we had done the day before. Then, go bury the body in the mountain woods behind the mansion. So the three of us headed back to Kunigisa's room, but our plans would end up being slightly modified. Gah! The instant Kunigisa entered the room, she let out a scream that reverberated into the hall. I took a peek and discovered the reason. This is... wow. Oh, what the hell? Kunigisa was uncharacteristically vocal. This is bullshit! Destroyed. It was destroyed. Inside her room lay destruction. All three of her computers and 2 PCs and workstation, they were all completely smashed to bits. Ah! Why did this happen? She frantically scrambled over to the completely exposed, mostly unrecognizable mess of mechanical parts. Awful, 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 awful. This is bullying. Demonic. There is a demon on this island. It's dubious. Ichan. A tragedy. Ah! This is a rupture organ compound fracture of computers. Even the monitors are busted. Why? Oh, this keyboard was impossible to build. The holographic memory. Oh my god, the motherboard. What happened to... oh my god, it's been smashed. What the hell is this? She had lost it. Like flipping a switch. For a happy-go-lucky girl like her, this was a fairly rare state to be in. Or at least it was the first time I'd ever seen her like this, since coming back to Japan. Why would they do something like this? Oh, it's too awful. Ichan. So what do you think? It's ghastly. Even supposing these computers were a nuisance, there was no need to go this far. They were smashed up so bad, it seemed like overkill. I wonder if they used some kind of iron bar. It's not a very clean method of destruction. Or maybe it was a hatchet or something. Why did this happen? Who did this? You think it was the killer? Hikari-san said in a whisper. The killer? Maybe the person who murdered Kanami-san and Akane-san was trying to create some chaos. But what was the point? What did the killer have to gain by destroying Kunigisa's equipment? Oh, poor me. I want to cry, Kunigisa said, as if really about to cry. Well, whatever. I already sent it back up to my house and all. But still, I went to so much trouble to build these. I didn't see this coming. I guess next time I'll have to make a motherboard out of unbreakable parts. Wow, back up to the rescue, huh? At least we won't lose the software you made. But in reality, it wasn't much of a rescue. Kunigisa's computers weren't the normal equipment used by your average professional. They were all completely homemade. So the external parts were actually worth even more than the internal parts. Now we can't even view what's on the digital camera. It looks like the camera and the mobile memory were busted as well. Oh, this is horrible. Does this person think money grows on trees? I thought for a moment. Hey, wait, you're one to talk? I snapped my fingers. As expected, the camera seemed to have been destroyed very deliberately, which made the culprit's motive very clear. I see. It makes perfect sense, I muttered to myself. Yeah, this is surprisingly easy to understand. They must have been afraid of us snooping around any further. What do you mean? Hikari-san asked. You know why this happened? Yeah, I think so. You saw them yesterday too, right? Kunigisa's pictures from the Altair had all been sent to the hard disk through a USB connection. Whether or not the culprit knew all that, they must have figured those images were incriminating. The workstation and the mobile memory had probably been destroyed with extra care. Kaname-san's room, those images, I think that's why this happened. We hadn't told anyone about the mail or the info from Chikun, so the killer wouldn't have known about that, but everybody knew about the pictures. Kunigisa slumped her shoulders in realization of this fact. I didn't even bother applying extra protection. I never imagined anyone would resort to something like this. This room doesn't have a lock on it, does it? Hikari-san said. I guess you were unlucky. I patted Kunigisa on the head. Keep your spirits up. I guess this means we can't just sit around happily waiting for the detective guy to show up. I put my hands on her shoulder and sort of half-hugged her. No more playing around, huh? We didn't know who the culprit was, and we didn't know the motive either, but we did know one thing for sure. The bastard had destroyed something precious to Kunigisa Tomo, for his or own selfish reasons. This was unforgivable. Hey, wait a second, Hikari-san said, as if suddenly thought of something. Who did this? The killer, right? We don't know who that is right now. But we were all in the dining room, and then we came directly here, right? Who could have had time to destroy everything like this? Whoa. We had been in this room until Akari-san came, and then we went to the storage room, where the murder had happened. But we were the last ones there. Everyone else was already gathered. Then everyone went directly to the dining room as a group. If that was the case, or rather, that was the case, logically, there was nobody here who could have committed this destruction. This is obviously the work of a human being, but nobody had time to do it. What the hell? It didn't make sense. Yet, another mystery to worry about, just like Kanami-san's sealed room and Akane-san's headless body. No, this was different. This was a different sort of mystery. It was beyond simply trying to figure out people's alibis and motives. It wasn't a matter of tricks or gimmicks. It was simply an impossibility. Which means maybe this is the key. I looked at Kunigisa, I looked at Hikari-san, and then I thought, if this was the key, then where the hell was the door? Determining that the equipment was beyond repair, we decided to continue our planned course of action, and by that I mean Akane-san's burial. We went to the storage room and placed her body on a big stretcher, and headed for the mountain woods behind the mansion. The stretcher was kept in the mansion in case of an emergency. I doubt that they had an emergency like this in mind. No, maybe they had. This time we would bury the body alone, without a sleeping bag. Hikari-san took the front of the stretcher, and I took the back. Despite her small frame, Hikari-san's length as a service as a maid was apparent by her surprising upper body strength. Kunigisa followed behind me, carrying the shovel. Carrying the back of the stretcher placed the corpse directly in my field of vision, front and centre. Even being used to this sort of thing, it wasn't the most pleasurable experience in the world. On the way, I remembered something that I'd meant to ask. Hikari-san, was Akane-san wearing the same clothes when you brought the book last night? Yes, they were the same, she replied. Of course, she still had a head too. It wasn't the type of joke you laugh at. It was far too true to be funny. The digital camera had been destroyed beyond all repair, so naturally, we couldn't make a record of the storage room where Akane-san was killed. This was probably exactly what the killer had hoped. Surely the killer was mocking us, but he or she was taking Kunigisa's memory too lightly. If we assume that the killer broke everything because he didn't want there to be a record of the scene where Kanami-chan was killed, why exactly was that? Did the pictures show some concrete evidence? I don't remember anything like that. Inside our head was an image of not only yesterday's crime scene, but also the storage room we had just visited. Just as accurate and precise as a digital camera. They didn't call Kunigisa Toma a prodigy for nothing. Anything sticking out in your mind? Tons of things are sticking out. I'm trying to narrow them down. Right, she began mumbling to herself. Once she had gone to this kind of state, it was best not to bother her. I looked back to Hikari-san. So where should we bury her, Hikari-san? I suppose away from Ibuki-san would be best. I couldn't have agreed more. Walking through the mountain forest for a while, we eventually found the spot we thought would be a decent burial ground. We decided to begin digging. Yesterday, we had twice as many men, so today promised to be relatively exhausting. I had hoped Shinya-san would be able to help us, but alas, he was on a different team. That, and for the average guy, having to bury the corpses of 2 acquaintances in a period of 2 days was more than a little nerve-wracking. Unless you were a guy like me. In which case, it was nothing to write home about. This should do. I brushed my hair out of my face. If this was summer, I would have been sweating like crazy. I hoisted myself out of the hole and lowered Akane-san's body into it. Then, a brief, silent prayer. I didn't know whether or not there was a point to such actions, but I figured it was better to do it than not. Regardless of where or how I die, or who kills me for what reasons, you won't hear a complaint out of me. The last words I heard from Akane-san. But did she really mean it? Even being killed like this? Had she crossed over to the other side like a saint, without a single gripe? For me, that was an impossible feat. I really wish we could bury her with the head, Hikari-san said. Ibuki-san too. Why do you suppose the killer cut their heads off anyway? That's the question of the week, I guess. But we keep coming up with the same answer. That is, I don't know. I scooped up some dirt with a shovel and began burying Akane-san's body. My joints would be hurting tomorrow for sure. If I still had the mental facilities to feel pain, that is. There was no saying I wouldn't be the next murder victim. The chances weren't very high, but it wasn't impossible. A serial killing. Maybe it was already over with Kanami-san and Akane-san. According to the information from Kunigisa's old buddy, Chikun, the pair had some sort of relationship in the past, although I couldn't say what kind. So there was always the possibility that the whole ordeal was already over. But maybe that was just overly optimistic thinking. At long last, Akane-san's body was completely buried. Hikari-san, since we're already out here, would you mind taking me somewhere where we could see the storage room window from the outside? Certainly. She began walking. Kunigisa followed behind, blue hair waving. Speaking of which, I hadn't put her hair up at all today. I decided to do so properly once we got back to her room. As we were talking, Hikari-san turned to me with a serious expression. Thank you so much. Not knowing what it was in regards to, I was taken aback. At breakfast, you'd stood up for me, so I wanted to thank you. Oh, well, I didn't just do it because it was you. I just hate the idea of making the same mistake again. Even putting mistakes aside, I just hate repetitive actions. Really. Maybe that was why my memory was so bad. That is so you, I-chan. Kunigisa giggled childishly. But really, you did it for Hikari-chan, right? 'Cause, she's right in the center of your strike zone. What exactly is my strike zone? She's older than you, she's a girl, she's petite, she has long hair, she's slender, she doesn't wear any rings or anything, and she's even wearing an apron dress. I've never said anything about an apron dress. Also, girls who wear jeans at the bottom and nothing on the top. Librarian-looking girls who dress in white uniforms and wear glasses. Gothy girls who are taller than you and have brown hair and wear jerseys. Don't make me sound like such a freak. Damn, she was sure chatty. But to be sure, Hikari-san was totally up my alley. In terms of speed, I preferred the slight harshness of Hikari-san's personality, but certainly I had no problem with Hikari-san's gentle slow ball. I suppose Teriko-san was some sort of disappearing magic pitch. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Hikari-san gave me an ambiguous smile tinged with embarrassment. Anyway, I wanted to thank you. My mistress can be quite severe in these cases. Plus, unlike yesterday with Soniyama-san, this time it seems like I must be the killer. Even I couldn't help but think so. At least with Soniyama-san there was a pretense that it was a sealed room, so really nobody could have been the killer. But this time, don't worry about that anymore, Hikari-san. I was becoming a little irritated, so I cut her off mid-sentence. You already thanked me, and you're already showing your sincerity, so you don't have to keep thanking me for everything. But if the situation had been reversed, you wouldn't have just left me there on my own, right? I think you would have done the same for me. But I think if that happened, you would thank me. Well, I'll be damned. She was playing hardball. I think he means that you're a friend, Kunigisa said. And we don't doubt our friends. That's why I don't think I-chan or you could be the killer. Friends? She nodded, brimming with emotion. I've never had friends before. I've been by my mistress' side for as long as I can remember. I don't have friends either. Neither does I-chan. So we'd be happy if you'd be our friend. Kunigisa took Hikari-san's hand. Just looking at a sight like this was enough to bring a smile to your face. But realistically speaking, it would have been hard for Kunigisa and Hikari-san to continue a friendship, I thought. From here on out, Irie-san would likely need Hikari-san at her side more than ever before, and meanwhile, Kunigisa was scheduled to head back home, and once back, Kunigisa was bound to stay holed up in a room all that time. Kunigisa Tomo was a lonesome girl. They often say that geniuses are completely self-sufficient. If that was the case, Kunigisa fit the bill. I'm most likely unable to analyse the situation in any other way. It was I who was the loneliest. Oh, it's over here, the window. I looked around in confusion for a minute. There wasn't a window in sight. Oh, is it that one? I said, pointing to the only window I could see, which stood at about the height of my chest. Yeah, that is. But that height is... It looks high up from the inside, but half of this place is built on a mountain, so... While I listened to her, I looked into the room through the window. I could make out a small puddle of blood, the wooden chair, and the door. It was without a doubt the storage room where I had been sleeping, and where Akane-san was killed. Wow. So part of this mansion was buried in the mountain, including this room. In that case, breaking in wouldn't be so hard, huh? But you can't open the window from the outside, and it doesn't lock with just a latch either, so you couldn't get it to unlock by rattling it a little. Well, what about the possibility that Akane-san opened the window on her own, letting the killer in? Kunigisa said. Maybe the killer knocked to get her to open it. You know, anybody home? It's hard to believe Akane-san would do anything to let the killer inside. I mean, it's Akane-san. Plus, this really is quite a height. It feels more real when you're looking from the top down. I, for one, sure wouldn't jump down from the window. The window was the kind that tilted open, and only partially, so it didn't look like there was much room to make a balanced jump either. And it looked like if you didn't make a proper landing, it could easily break a bone, or even die if you happened to hit your head. But even supposing Akane-san had accidentally let the killer in, She could have easily called for help. The house phone was right by her. Maybe she was attacked in her sleep. Oh, wait, I'm an idiot. If she was sleeping, she couldn't open the window, Kubikiri said. Even if you know that fact, how did the killer get back out? Even an expert rock climber couldn't get up a flat wall like that. Like a gecko. Kubikiri poked her head inside the window and looked around. Oh, it's a dangerous drop, huh? What if the killer used a rope? Rope, huh? But there are no trees in this area to tie it around. I looked around the area. Whether it had been deforested or it has always been this way, the whole place was nothing but a big grass plain, and there was nothing appropriate for tying a rope around. And you know, rappelling isn't the easiest trick in the book, either. I have some experience with it, but it's pretty damn tough. The skin from your hands peels off and stuff. Not if you wear gloves. Well, yeah, but still, it's pretty unlikely. They might as well have brought out a ladder and stuck it through the window. That's probably more likely anyway, I said. But a ladder wouldn't fit through a gap this small. It would get caught halfway, and the person couldn't fit through. I wonder. Hikari-san, is there a ladder anywhere on this island? Well, no. What about the possibility that someone brought one with them? I don't think so. I would have noticed if someone brought something that big. How about a rope ladder? They could easily hide it in their luggage, and it wouldn't get caught on the window. Ichan, you even forget stuff you said yourself. If it was a rope ladder, there wouldn't be anything to tie it to. It would be possible if they stuck some kind of metal hook in the wall, but that would have left a hole, and the wall looks fine as far as I can see. That was true. This was just common sense, but not the kind of thing even worth bringing up. But for the sake of confirmation, we were discussing it anyway. It was just another form of pre-established harmony. I faced Hikari-san. Have any ideas? I asked. Or even just any observations? Nothing in particular, she said as she approached the window. But assuming the killer didn't enter through the door, the window was the only other way to break in, huh? Break in. But maybe they didn't have to break in. I was just coming up with this on the spot. The chair is over there, which means that must be where Akane-san was sitting and reading. Maybe the killer made some sort of lasso out of rope, put it through the window, caught it around Akane-san's neck, and then pulled her up, so she was strangled to death. Then she was pulled up as far as the window, where her head was cut off. How about that? Implausible, huh? At the very least, it didn't have any holes. The killer wouldn't have to sneak through the window, or even enter the room. They still could have killed her. There were still no holes at... Oh, no, wait, that's no good. Why not? I didn't think it was so implausible, Hikari-san said, confused. If that was the case, anyone could have done it. Human bodies aren't so light. For a woman, Akane-san wasn't small. She was taller than average, and she looked like she must have weighed at least 110 pounds. She probably wasn't as much as 130, but she definitely wasn't in the 90s either. To lift her from this height would have required not only a really tough rope, but some incredible arm strength to boot. I definitely couldn't have done it. To pull someone up this high with just 2 arms was a crazy feat of strength. Shinji-san's probably the strongest one here, but he's got an alibi, and even if he's the strongest one here, that's very relative. I don't think even he could lift a human body by himself. Not to mention that Akane-san would have been resisting all the while. And while she was resisting, the house phone would have been right beside her. If she even just kicked it over, somebody would have discovered what was happening. It wouldn't have been a very wise method. Plus, in that case, the window would have had to be open. But would she ever really open the window and then turn her back to it? She wasn't stupid, in fact, quite the opposite, so she was probably being somewhat cautious. Indeed. Damn it, and here I thought I was getting a little warm, but I was still on the wrong track. I felt an unpleasant sensation, like I was in some twisted dimension. It was like searching for the corner of a circle. Something was decidedly off. Something was depressingly messed up. What the hell was I doing wrong? I felt as if I was being given the runaround. Big time. Anyway, let's go back to the room. There's nothing more to see here. Not that there was anything to see back at the room. Seemingly reluctant to leave, Kunigisa stayed, gazing in through the window for a while, but finally turned and began to follow me. Did you spot something? Nothing special. More important, I'm hungry. Oh yeah? Then let's have lunch, Hikari-san said. Yeah, I nodded.